can't tell you how pleased I am to be sitting next to Bob. From the very beginning, and you saw the 1999, I was more businessman and a hobbyist technologist, but I knew just enough. But from the day one of this conference, it was about business. Yeah, we had to get the mail servers working, and yeah, we had to keep the technology, but you get that stuff taken care of, and then you get to work and try to impact the business. So to have you know, the CEO running an 80,000 person global organization, the big ship, saying a few of the things I heard you say about data scientists, and it's not a buzzword, and it's foundational. We've been waiting to hear those words from you for a long time, so thank you for that. You know? And I think there's a few people in the audience who would appreciate that. So I was sitting back there listening, and we've talked a lot in the last couple of weeks to try to say, you know, what can we say in 20 minutes or so? You know, what kind of conversation we could have. So we wrote down some questions, and based upon what you said, let's talk about that foundational versus hype thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we've sent .com, we obviously saw a big hype phase. We went very high, it dropped, but some good companies came out of that, but a lot of them did not. Are we in a hype phase right now? I mean, with all the capital coming in and all, 3,000 companies, what do you think, where are we in that tech cycle, if you will?
Well, for sure there's hype around some things, right? And I can tell you we've invested in some things that turned out to be hype. That's why the commitment to being commercial is so important. Things that are hype aren't sustainable. But there's an awful lot that isn't hype. And you take that example I gave about the traditional tenant rep business that we now call advisory and transaction services. We can't do the things we're doing today for clients without the digital capability we have, without the data capability we have. That's not hype. Right. When you're changing outcomes for clients, that's not hype. And there's a lot going on that's changing outcomes for clients.
Well, if you think about it, from a tech standpoint, mainframe computers, a lot of computing power, few people. More people, mini computers. Distributed PCs, everybody should have a PC. Now we carry them in our pockets, right? So now the foundation's set. We're all connected via the internet or telecommunications. The data's starting to flow. The data's getting thrown into these big repositories, hence your data scientists, right? I mean, what are we going to do with all this data? What are we going to just gather data, or are we going to get insight?
Yeah. Well, the goal is to get insight, right? And so we've started in a couple places in that regard. Number one, I mentioned earlier, we're really, really obsessed over this notion of understanding client outcomes. Again, I think we got to differentiate between client service. All of us have been around the notion of great client service, great communications, being professional. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actually knowing how we impact the outcome we delivered impacted the client. You can do that with surveys and so forth, but sometimes the surveys don't give you the insight you need. So we're trying to work with our data team to actually collect the kind of data we need to truly understand the outcomes we delivered. And as we say, then use that information to better serve the clients going forward, provide better outcomes. Right. We have a big outsourcing business where we essentially take over the real estate functions, strategy, property management, or facilities management, project management for occupiers, all kinds of opportunity on the usage of space, the availability of space in the marketplace, cost around the occupancy of space, huge opportunity to serve those clients with data, and we're really focused on that.
And as it does get smaller and smarter, more compressed, you need to substantiate your theories, right?
Absolutely.
So if you were Jamie Dimon in the financial services industry, we could have been having this conversation probably 10 years ago, maybe even 15. I think financial services realized that data, good information, you talked about this next generation of transaction. I mean, you go onto an E-Trade account or a Schwab account, when you're looking at that screen, you've got 30, 40 systems of data that's coming from all over different places, but it's come together, right? So the financial services had good relationships with their IT teams for a long time. You mentioned something about Chandra, that she has a seat at the table. For a long time, many of the folks in this industry, they don't, right? They get handed a list after the strategy meeting. What do you say to your fellow CEOs?
Well,
as far as the relationship between you and tech?
Well, our technology team is embedded. As I said, there's some key underpinnings of what we do in technology. It has to be embedded, it has to be commercial, and it has to impact client outcomes. When you embed it, that means it's part of the team, right? We view our technology professionals today, our digital professionals today, the same as our traditional market-facing professionals. They are part of the team that goes out there to serve the clients. in every way. And you know what? That's changed the way our traditional people feel about things. Our traditional people have a little more hop in their step today because they know that they can show up as part of a team that can do things that we couldn't do before. There was a little lack of self-assuredness developing over the last few years about this hole that we had in our game. Mm-hmm. I think we filled that hole, but you can only fill that hole if you make those people as prominent as the traditional people.
Right. So to the executive leadership of the hundreds of millions or thousands of companies in our industry, messages, tech just has to be embedded in your executive leadership thinking.
Has to be embedded, and it has to be a group of people that's on the same status as the rest of your professionals. It's part of your product. It's not something that sits behind your product and support it. It's part of your product. By the way, one of the things that's happening is that we're seeing in some areas where things are flipping a little. And look at this floor capability we got when we acquired that business, where in fact the traditional people may be backing up a little bit, and the technology people, the digital people, are a little more out in front, and that's fine too.
Right. And so it's one thing to change a small organization, and I honestly believe that we're going to have lots of technology. We got a sold out exhibit floor. We got all sorts of new companies. We're going to have people sitting in panels and talking about this for the next 2 days. We have technology. But I actually think it's more about the human side and the organizational side. So, you're the leader of a company, and you've got to look in the mirror every morning and you got to say, am I capable of change? Especially at the rate that this is happening. Because as a leader, you go into the company, you influence your department, and you're steering an 80,000 person ship, right? So, and you're doing it. It sounds like, you're moving that ship pretty aggressively, right? What's the message to smaller companies where executive leadership may be a little hesitant?
Well, I started saying this to our leadership team, and if you talk to them, they'd tell you this a few years ago. I think our need to move forward in the digital arena was as much about human behavior, organizational behavior, as it was about technology. You had to have people that were capable of doing it and people that wanted to do it. Now, we're in a company that, and by the way, we're in an industry, not just a company, we're in an industry that has always been super entrepreneurial, right? What do entrepreneurs want to do? They want to find new ways to do things they couldn't do before. So there's a mindset among a lot of the people out there that's very supportive of the notion of getting to the next place, digitally speaking, technology speaking, right? And so I would say if you did a scattergram of all our people in our company, of course, where the company sits was kind of the weighted average positioning of our people. But a lot of people whose position was ahead of the kind of weighted average position of the whole company are the people that have sustained and become more prominent in the business, and they're dragging us along, and it's a cultural thing, and that side of it has been easier than I thought it was going to be.
Wow,
what is hard with 80,000 people, I commented on those 35 applications that we track and invest in and use. It's not easy to get everybody to understand what you have. Right?
Well, a perfect example, though, is when Lou came to you, with the idea for LA. Get rid of the cubes. Nobody's got offices. That was a bold move, right? And so I'm sure you were involved in the conversations. He's like, okay, well, let's try this. But what I see from it is he had full executive support. Mm-hmm. He was allowed to fail, or maybe not totally fail, but it wasn't going to be perfect the first time. But now that's been adopted through the whole company. Tell us a little bit about that particular decision to let him take that kind of risk.
Well, first of all, Lou Horn changed CBRE. He fundamentally changed CBRE, and I want to give you an anecdote to support that. If you went back not very long ago and watched companies like ourselves or our competitors or people that were in relatively similar parts of the business show up on campus at colleges, we'd get some attention. Maybe a little bit lukewarm, but we'd get some attention. Last year, in Dallas, Los Angeles, and New York, we ran summer intern programs. And in each market we were looking, and these were generally for students between their junior and senior year in college. In each market we were looking for between 10 and 15 interns. And in all three markets we had over 500 applications. And our HR people that were running these programs looked into what's going on here. This free addressing, what we call CBRE 360 approach to officing, has had a huge impact on our reputation. So that's kind of the external view and the impact it's had. Internally, it's done a couple things. First of all, there are a lot of long-standing professionals in our sector that thought they had to have private offices with leather couches, and Lou had to get them over that. But there was a bigger thing than that. The bigger thing was all of us, Lou and me and everybody else, had to be paperless to do that. You can't do that without being paperless. And that was a huge transition. Now, I tell you, I travel all over the world, and it's been a wonderful thing for me. It's a much lighter ride when I do it.
Takes a little while to get used to it, but once you do, it's like, wow.
Wonderful thing. And almost everybody that's gotten over that hump has liked it.
When you were at that point of making the decision to do it, though, were there a couple senior level execs that say, what are we doing here? I mean, did you have to get in there and block for Lou?
Well, Lou did it, and I'll tell you, LA wasn't the first place we did it. The very first place we did it, and it wouldn't surprise people that know what goes on around the world, was in Amsterdam.
Right.
They're kind of out in front on this kind of stuff. And so what Lou did was, yes, there were a small handful of very influential, very productive, very senior objectors, and he took a group of them over to Amsterdam. And that was kind of the final thing that got us over the hump. And now you make accommodations, right? And it is a reality. One of the things that's happened as we've gone to this free addressing approach to utilization of space is that you realize people do need to be in private rooms sometimes, right? If I'm discussing a compensation of individuals with our global head of human resources, I'm probably not going to be one that's sitting in Starbucks.
Or
right?
having Alexa.
Yeah. But so they're time, and so we've accommodated that. But what you do is you take the private offices, you put them in the center, and you make them all glass so that light shines through and so forth. And those senior people that we needed to accommodate, needed to educate, we've largely gotten them over the hump, and they've become champions for this approach.
That usually is what happens. Your biggest objectors become your biggest supporters. But for a large organization to make such a, I mean, you are people who are saying lease more space. That's in your DNA, right? And now you're saying less space. That not was it just big and bold, but it was culturally, a big adjustment. And then all of a sudden, you're out there telling your clients, well, maybe you don't need that much space. Maybe we should make it smaller and smarter. And I think that, in some respects, can put you ahead of that curve. Yeah.
Well, we did tell our clients that, and we told a lot of our clients. One of the things that I failed to mention that got a lot of these senior professionals over the hump is that our clients became fascinated by what we were doing. Lou has the numbers. I can't give them off the top of my head, but we've literally had tens of thousands of clients through that space. Well, what do? They come through that space and they say, well, we need this. Can you help us do this? And our senior professionals have gotten a lot of business out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, because you show. You just don't talk about something. You're living it, and that carries a lot of weight. All right, stay on the same theme, but going back out to the industry, not necessarily just CB. Age of acceleration. Last year's general session, we said, commercial real estate or corporate real estate, 25 miles an hour. Commercial, I think, is a little faster, 50 miles an hour. Tech today, 100 miles an hour. Tech tomorrow, AI, blockchain, autonomous, 200 miles an hour. And there's a little device sitting right there, and we're going to see in a couple minutes some really cool stuff. But it's fundamental change. I mean, does the day ever come where Alexa answers your phones and is your receptionist? And I mean, and the second part of that question is, that's a paradigm shift of agrarian age proportion, right? I mean, all of a sudden, we now have very smart, technology that can displace humans. That's 300 miles an hour. Are you thinking that far down the road?
Well, we're trying to, right? And the reality of it is, I said at the outset, I'm not a technologist, right? But I've made darn sure we have a bunch of them in our company in very prominent roles, and we try to get their best thinking. That's another thing I believe in so much, is that the best thinking comes from groups, not solitary individuals. And so when we work on strategy, what we say, we try to coax the best strategy out of our people as a group and whatever outside help we get. Well, we try to coax the best thinking about technology out of our technology people and all of our people that are embedded with our clients in our clients' offices. And so, yeah, we know a lot of that stuff's coming. But here's the thing, Jim, that makes me not that worried about it. Of course, I'm worried about it like everybody is. But what makes me not that worried about it? We've got a lot of super talented people in the business now that are fully capable of dealing with it and leading it and driving it. Our general population, because of things like our 360 office approach, is much more able than they used to be. We interface with our clients pretty comfortably with the use of technology, and we serve them with the use of technology today. So, again, this foundation that we've built puts us in a place that we don't all need to seem so fragile and vulnerable about it. We need to feel like we can embrace it and use it and drive the business forward.
I mean, and if you look at history, even going back, agrarian, industrial, pre-information, and today, we adjust, right? But when I a little hesitancy when I hear people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates saying, we got to keep an eye on this AI thing, right? Because it's very powerful. And what we're just seeing and hearing today is just the beginning, right? So, I mean, there's the iPad from yesterday. Here's the iPad of today. That's 20 years between that and this. And then by today's time frames, probably would only take 3. AI is going to be on the scene pretty quick.
Yeah. It's going to be on the scene quick, and it's going to be a revolution, not an evolution when it happens. But human beings are made to deal with change, right? I'll give you an analogy that I think demonstrates that, and it's in our very own sector, right? It's the retail business, and today we're going through radical changes to retailing, omnichannel, et cetera, all driven by e-commerce, and e-commerce is being driven by technology. And there's a lot of chatter that almost would make you feel, if you listen to it, like, oh my gosh, retail's changing radically today. This has never happened before. Well, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in a town called Council Bluffs, Iowa, right across the river from a bigger town, Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska had about 500,000 people when I was growing up. Omaha, Nebraska had a beautiful downtown. It had shops, restaurants, theaters. It had everything, and you could walk it. And a lot of what we want today with retail, right? Well, what happened? The suburban malls came and completely crushed downtowns. And that was just Omaha, right? What about the bigger cities, right? And so the malls completely crushed downtown retail all over the country. That ran for a few years. And then what happened? Big box retail came along and crushed a lot of the malls, right? Then what happened? E-commerce came along. Well, there's always been a lot of change. When you're in the middle of it, you think it's the first, but it's not. Human beings are built to deal with change, and the way you deal with change is you start to build a foundation that allows you to do it, and you go from there.
Yeah, our theme for 20 years is lean in. Lean in. I mean, because we we do change. We actually change pretty well. And if you do lean in and you're not fearful of it, but you embrace it, then you're moving much faster and you're more competitive, and eventually your competitors see it and they're forced to change, and we move on. Going back to some of the emerging technologies, AI, the other one is picking us, we're seeing a lot of attention paid to is autonomous, right? Autonomous vehicles, and everybody thinks, it's here tomorrow. It's not here tomorrow, I don't think. It's gonna evolve over the next 3 to 5 years. But I am hearing people in LA saying, you know what, we should build our parking garages different, and be ready, just in case it happens faster. Do you think that's wise to think about 3 to 5 years out and have some plan Bs in place?
Oh, well, I don't think there's any doubt, and it's happening today. We had Andy Cohen, a lot of you probably know Andy. He's the CEO of Gensler. He spoke at our senior top producer event on this very subject a year and a half ago. And he talked about a lot of the things that are happening in the design arena. One very simple thing is a lot of their clients are asking them to not build these slope parking decks anymore. Why? Very simple. I don't think you want to go in a restaurant when it becomes a restaurant 10 years. Right. Yeah, so that's happening. One of the unfortunate realities about autonomous vehicles, which I do believe are coming, is that if you could fast forward 100 years and get beyond the built environment we have today, you'd get to a pretty good place. You'd get to the kind of place we want, more condensed CBDs that are walkable and pedestrian friendly. You don't have cars. The fact of the matter is, the first thing that's going to happen is the cars are going to come off the streets and they're going to park around the periphery. But you're still going to have the wide streets and you're still going to have the garages. And so it's going to be a longer period of time that we come to grips with the changes we need to make to the built environment to most effectively.
I think the real message is sit in a room with those smart people and throw this stuff on the wall, right? And to me, I think the biggest issue is not, is it going to change, is the timing, right? And if you're helping clients strategize, is this a 3-year issue, a 5-year issue, a 7-year issue? And none of us have crystal balls, but I think that conversation is helpful. So I've got one final question for you. To those people who are sitting in the audience, who are the technology people, whether they're property managers, facility managers, IT professionals, and they've got vision, they got passion, and they got some ideas. But when they knock on that door, nobody opens it, right? Their executive leadership is not as responsive as you are. What's the advice you give to them to get their executive leadership to maybe think about technology a little more strategically?
Well, and I'm being a little redundant here, Jim, but I want to go back to what it took for us to do it, right? you know, to get things done, you got to have something to aim at, right? If you don't have a target, it's hard. Where am I going here, right? And so we did two things, or we focused on two things that made it a lot easier for us to move downstream with technology. One thing we said is we're going to do stuff that changes outcomes for our clients, right? So if I come to you with an idea and you got clients and I'm going to change the outcomes for the clients, you're going to be more receptive. The other thing we said is it's got to be commercial. Things that aren't commercial generally aren't sustainable. Once we got our head wrapped around those things, it made it a lot easier for us to come to grips with what we needed to do. By the way, it made it hugely easier for us to recruit technology people because they believed they were going to come into our company and succeed.
Well, and what I just got out of that was also the message to the technical community is you got to get out of the office, you got to go talk to clients.
It's true of all of us.
All of us. Yeah, I mean, you can't sit there with your ideas. You got to go out and you got to throw them out there. You got to get them tested. You got to get them knocked down, and you got to feel their pain and feel their issues. And the only way you do that is getting out into the streets.
In the end, it's all about the clients.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, this has been a long journey for us, 20 years, and I don't think we could have landed at a better place here. We know we've been trying to get you for a couple of years, and everything worked out. And I will tell you, this man altered his travel plans for us today. He was committed to being here. We had lunch last week, a couple weeks ago, just kind of get to know each other. Really, really excited to see that ship that will force us all to move. You know, that it's got somebody at the helm like you with some vision and the capacity to take some risks. So thank you very, very much.
Thrilled to be part of it, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.